80. Dun, dun, dun. Seems like a lot. Is that right? That can't be right.
No, I'm pretty sure it's right because I think we had 77 code today.
My cheat sheet says 80. April 1st. Is that April Fool's Day?
Oh, wait. I thought today was April 1st. I'm like, really? I totally believed you. I was like, oh, I didn't realize it was April Fool's Day.
It is April 1st. Viewers. Viewer.
Yeah, no, the time is gone out of the window.
On such a lighthearted day such as April 1st, April Fool's Day, what topic do we have?
Well, I mean, I think, we're not recording this on April 1st, so technically our topic is still very serious. And I would say, yeah, go ahead.
Consciousness.
Your consciousness. And I would say we're probably the most qualified people.
Probably on the planet, the most qualified people. With all my PhDs and all your PhDs. All 0 of them for both of us.
No, I guess question 1 is, can you explore idea of consciousness, or basically what consciousness is, without purely through scientific exploration, and not through touch on spirituality or like esotericism or like general open view of like awareness and self, whatever you want to call that.
Right. I think that's how that's how it's probably approached in academia. But I think
without that,
I imagine.
You think so?
I think so. But I think it's right. I think if you go down to, whatever university, Center for Consciousness Research, it probably is there's not much, if any, woo stuff going on.
Yeah,
there.
I would say like it's almost impossible to explore consciousness without that.
I think so.
And so therefore, that is not a true exploration of consciousness.
Right, they're kind of missing half of it there.
So, but then by default, I'm thinking there has to be basically, even though it is positioned in the scientific world as scientific research, what it actually is exploration to consciousness on this larger scheme outside of finite ideas of science, not touching, whatever spirituality, or, you have to touch some realm of spirituality of awareness.
It seems that way to me.
I mean, the whole point of consciousness that somehow it is some form of awareness, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know that we would be able to define consciousness here. That's the problem in and of itself. But yeah, like in awareness, I'm not sure if I can do better than an awareness.
Are we done? We're done with the episode.
The end.
Yeah.
Right. Like 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, I would have said that consciousness is a product of the brain, the organ, the brain. And even back then, I wouldn't have really been able to distinguish between the brain, the organ, and the mind.
Just because you were young, or just because you never thought about it?
Oh, I thought about it. I thought about it a lot. But I didn't see the mind. If I gave any credence to the mind, it would have been some sort of abstract level above the brain. Like the brain is the organ, and the mind is the almost the entity that the brain emulates to do the thinking. The mind does the thinking, and the brain is the hardware where thinking happens to take place.
Yeah,
Maybe.
and then I guess, where did you think the mind was?
I thought the mind was in the brain. It was in as much as I know these computer metaphors are horrible. That in as much as the operating system is inside the computer. Inside the computer. These are really
very close. Yeah, watch out.
Really weird terms. The mind is inside the brain, and thinking happens inside the brain, and memory is all inside the brain. And basically, if you were able to successfully remove someone's brain and keep it alive and stick it in a jar and hook it up to the right, cameras and robotic things, that is equivalent to a person.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. I don't think that anymore at all.
Which, basically,
I don't know. Could that thing be alive? Alive, maybe, but I don't think that's a person anymore.
But those who are designing AI right now,
Yeah, I mean, there's a belief that if you were able to fully scan the brain, all the neurons and all the interconnectedness between them, and then you could emulate that, you get a person. Now this person's, a prisoner inside of a computer. But they have done that with like some sort of really primitive worm or something, or bacteria. No, it was a worm because it had a brain and it only had like 200 neurons. We've got however many bajillion neurons we have. So there's 200 neurons and they're interconnected, however they're interconnected. They scanned it and then they like hooked it up to a little worm robot and it was able to kind of navigate around and do stuff. Which I guess is neat, but A, is the worm conscious? I don't know the answer to that. And B, is the scanned, replicated robot worm brain 100% equivalent to the biological worm brain? I also don't know that. But it seems to me that human consciousness is happening at a layer higher than neurons and synapses and whatever inside the meaty brain material. And I say higher than, I mean like outside of, almost like the brain is more like it is tuned to the resonant frequency of your higher spirit. And through that, in the same way that a radio antenna is tuned to, a certain frequency, right? And can then some sort of communication happens through that. I believe that the brain does all kinds of incredible thinky stuff, but I think it also gets input messages, downloads, whatever you want to call it, from something that is not contained within my skin.
From yourself or others?
Both from my higher self and then from the collective conscious and then even from outside of this plane of existence.
Yeah.
I don't know that I can empirically prove that. But
meaning like
I can't
scientifically, like
right, yeah.
rigorously,
prove that in a court of law, prove that in a scientific debate with instruments and measurements and stuff. But it, like, okay, if I know, the quadratic formula, right, which I've since forgotten since high school, but if I still knew it and I had to work out, the roots of some equation, I could do that with pencil and paper and it would be really annoying and I'd be thinking and I can feel that is happening locally inside my mind. That is how it feels to me. It feels like that is actually happening inside my brain is doing the work on that. But when I do something creative, like a video or some sort of musical thing, that does not feel like it's coming from inside my brain. That feels like it is coming in from somewhere else. My brain can take over and, through experience or through, what sounds good to me or whatever, I can take the beginning of something and then I can extrapolate it out. But like, I just get the first few notes of things all the time, daily. I just get them. And I don't know where it comes from. I just hear them. It's really weird. But I don't think it's inside my brain. I think it's it's being beamed into me in the same way that that did it happen to Philip K. Dick? He wrote about it. in that
You wrote his. I
that
didn't
book,
read his.
but I thought we heard something that it happened to him, and then his book was kind of like a biography about it, because he was the character in the book.
Oh yeah, we heard that he had all these experiences.
I'm trying to remember the name
and then
of the
he
book,
decided
but
to write fictional books
there it
about the
is.
fictional character. That was him.
Yeah, so he got some sort of download, and people throughout history have gotten downloads.
I mean, I get downloads all the time.
Yeah, but like people any religious text was downloaded throughout history. I think most impressive creative works, the symphonies and the Sistine Chapel, and Michelangelo's David, and all these, right? That doesn't feel like that is a thinky brain thing. And I know there's right brain, left brain, there's the analytical, there's the creative. I get it. But it feels like the ancient Greeks, they had the concept of the muse, right? The muses who would like give you inspiration. It's like that. It's like it's literally coming from elsewhere.
You're gonna have to take a sip. It's gonna bother the heck out of me.
What are you talking about?
just sip it down a little bit. It's like a disaster waiting to happen. Okay, thank you.
I tried to take the smallest sip possible.
I saw the layer go down, so that's the only thing that matters. I guess if we are starting at an idea that there is or there's no such thing as like channeling or downloading or right, like if you start out with the premises, if you do or do not believe in channeling or downloads of information or muses, right? What muses or oracles in Delphi, right? Like what did oracles do? They tapped into this higher realm, and then they basically brought in amazing knowledge. And then at the time, all the Greeks had to go and basically consult the oracle before anything was done, anything important that was done, including like, oh, where do we set up the next city? Or how do we lay out the city plans? Or who's going to be in charge of it? Or like, do we attack these people or do we not? Everything. All the important decisions were done through the oracle. Now, I want to point out that to begin with, the oracle was actually a real oracle, and they actually relayed information for real.
Yeah.
But then after, who was it that
Was
the guy, the god,
Constantinople or Constantine?
No, the male god
Apollo?
What?
Apollo?
Is it Apollo? Maybe
it's
it
the
was
Temple
Apollo.
of Apollo.
Okay, yeah, and so at some point, the oracles, which were these just women who channeled, at some point, the patriarchy or the powers to be recognize the harm that they, or the power that they carry, and then therefore the harm that they can bring onto the patriarchal power. And then they decide to basically rewrite the system to where they place Apollo in charge of the oracles.
That's right. The man's job.
And then the priest who report through or to Apollo / then have to stand by the oracle and translate the oracle's message to the people who come there to basically seek oracle's guide. Another
man's job.
Yeah.
Got it.
Right.
Got to be the middleman. So
I want to say, at some point, whenever that happens, right, there's the shift between, and I'm not saying 100% shift, but a very large shift to where, what idea of consciousness is an interpretation of greater consciousness. And then what the system does to discount it, control it, obliterate it, or obscure it. And I think that's basically what we're facing today. We're facing the remnants, or really the full-on propagation of the rudimentary understanding of what we are and how we communicate with the world, and then what information we bring forth. And then our consciousness is basically derived from that.
Right.
We derive the idea that in the brain, which is this, let's say, electromagnetic organ that fires electric circuits, that does something, we scientifically understand that. And then that creates these neural pathways, and they hold / propagate / manipulate information, and then create our idea of behavior and consciousness. And
Right.
it's, for all intents and purposes, if you want to control everything, including each individual, you would want to propagate and then only allow self to be what basically is perceived as this very finite closed electrical circuit, right? The goal is to say, here's you and here's your closed electrical circuit, and that is the only access and power you have.
Right. And I think that's like most, maybe all of that brain understanding is probably right. It's just incomplete. It's like, are memories somehow stored in, or the brain clearly has something to do with it, to me. And, if you get damage to that area of the brain that everybody seems to agree is responsible for, I don't know, language, then, if you have a stroke in the language area of the brain, then you now have trouble pronouncing things. And if you have a stroke in the memory area of the brain, you have trouble remembering things. And it seems like that works. But I think that's incomplete.
No, but there are plenty of cases, like we talked yesterday, right? Where after that area of the brain gets damaged somehow, right? And let's say becomes unelectrified, then new neural pathways can
Right.
develop if you practice them.
Right.
And then basically develop a different area of your brain.
Yeah.
But
that's neuroplasticity.
Yeah, but neuroplasticity doesn't sound like you're so right, you're not rebuilding a place. You're not relearning the numbers, right? Like with my mom, right? She now has hard time with numbers after her stroke, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the part of her brain that controls the numbers or processes numbers or order of numbers or like greater, like what is it? Like lesser than or greater than type of environment.
Days of the week sometimes.
Yeah. So just like counting sequencing, right?
Yeah.
You have sequencing maybe, is damaged, right? And then basically they say that if you start to practice the idea of what it means to have sequencing, if you start going into the physical practice of like, sequencing, and you start to learn sequencing, you're not relearning it. You're basically developing a new neural pathway.
To access it.
I think to access it.
Right. And not necessarily to access the area of your brain that's damaged, but to access it.
To access the information of what I think here's what's happening, of what you used in the past to access the compilation of ideas that is sequencing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Right.
And that feels, intuitively, this is, again, where most of our information comes intuitively. Intuitively, that seems more plausible than this part of the brain holding the idea of number sequencing. And then therefore, you're just taking the number sequencing idea and placing it elsewhere in your brain.
Yeah. I mean, this is similar to the phenomenon that throughout history there's been the same thing discovered by multiple people at the same time.
Yeah.
Einstein and some other guy, I forgot his name, discovered relativity at the same time.
Yeah.
In different countries. Newton and Leibniz discovered the calculus at the same time in different countries. And then there's, it's 1999. Let's have 2 movies about asteroids. There's the one with Bruce Willis, and then there's the other one.
Yeah.
And then, there's the Bug's Life and Ant Story at the same time from different studios. There's all these things throughout history where an idea is ready to be plucked from the ether, and there's a handful of people who are in tune with it and pluck it at the same time. And then history ends up remembering one or the other. but there's a lot simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me believe that there is some. I mean, Rupert Sheldrake calls it the morphic field or morphic resonance out there that we're all just plucking from. If we can, if we do, I think you can choose to live in isolation and not do it if you want to, but
not do what? Not participate in a morphic field?
I think so. I think you can probably isolate yourself if you really, really want to. But I don't know that would be a great life. There's also the 100 Monkeys the theory, 100 Monkeys
I think it's experiment. Yeah.
Where, all right, so there's Island A and there's Island B, right? And they both got monkeys on them. And if on Island A you teach a monkey, I don't know what. Oh, if you hit a coconut with a rock, you could open the coconut. Whatever it is, a monkey gets taught something, right? He will go and show his monkey friends, and as soon as about 100 of these monkeys on Island A learn this, then the islands on Monkey B, the monkeys on Island B.
That would be great if there's islands on Monkey B. There probably are.
The monkeys on Island B, who have an ocean between them and Island A, will start doing it too. There's been no monkey-to-monkey communication. There's no ambassador going over and sharing, hey, look at this coconut technique. No, they just start doing it. It makes no sense in a normal 3D world that could possibly happen. What kind of telepathy madness is this? But yet it seems to happen.
Yeah.
So clearly something is out there that consciousness, even monkey consciousness, can tap into. I'm putting our consciousness above monkey consciousness. So if they can do it, then definitely we can do it. Although, there's some people maybe not above monkey consciousness. So either you believe in a world where this experiment, which has been done and proven, is false, and all this stuff is false, and Jesus never downloaded anything, and Muhammad never downloaded anything, and Beethoven just really thought really hard to do this, and all this stuff, and none of this stuff ever existed at all, and it's all just synapses and neurons, and that's it. Or, to me, as soon as you just crack that door and you let in any one thing that is, quote, unexplainable by, microscopes, then the door's open. And it's like, okay, well, if the door's open into something that is a little bit beyond, microscopes, then the door's all the way open.
Yeah. And I would say, scientifically, even scientifically, besides the fact that all scientists basically had downloads, Tesla literally said that he was getting downloads
that's a great example.
From the Martians and I think Phoenicians too, right? But everybody else. I mean, heck, whenever Elon goes into his fugue state and everybody keeps on harping on that, he's getting downloads.
Yeah, right.
Or he's getting downloads either from higher consciousness or from his higher self that is piped into a multidimensionality of his existence, and he's elsewhere actually already experiencing the multidimensionality, and he's basically getting the download of the kind of like the arrival style loop.
Yeah. Right.
That he's able to basically propagate into this dimensionality.
Yeah.
I mean, so scientifically, most of the scientists, those who are willing to, but those who don't care about being ridiculed, still, will admit to these informations, these explorations of consciousness, that if you sit long enough in any one meditation, right? Like Thomas Campbell keeps on saying that, like, the best way for you to start to open up to the truth, as opposed to belief that is your locked electrical box, right? Like you individualized electric circuit that you believe that is true. The way to open up into this to meditation. If anyone has done any significant amount of meditation, I don't even want to say significant. Like if you sat somewhere for 20 minutes, let's say once, I think maybe even once, or 30 minutes once. I mean, heck, sometimes I sit there and I just zonk out. And then I'm completely elsewhere. Like no thought, no nothing. I'm not even trying to meditate. Do you know what I mean? I'm just in that fugue state that meditation puts you in, but like without any conscious awareness of the state.
Yeah.
Right. If you go into that state, what is the explanation? Like, right, you're not conscious to the point where you believe that this is it. You're quite conscious to the idea that there's something else.
Yeah. I mean, and it's, in the 3D sense, yes, your brain waves are changing. Yes, that's true. And all that. But that alone doesn't explain to me a complete shift in your experienced reality.
Yeah.
The one more example is, I think most people have had, they've had something they're thinking about, or some problem they're trying to solve, or some issue they're trying to deal with, and they can't figure it out. And then all of a sudden, bam, in the shower. Oh, okay.
Why shower?
That's the place where it stereotypically happens, is in the shower. You're hit with, oh my gosh, in the shower. It's sometime you're not thinking about it.
Yeah, usually.
It's sometime that you're, just mindlessly, scrub-a-dub-dubbing, or you're driving, or, you're something where your mind is relaxed and you're not actively thinking about it. And I think the conventional explanation is, oh, your mind is relaxed, so that lets the neurons do whatever the neurons do and pre-associate things. But I don't buy that as the explanation. I think it's your mind is relaxed, and so now you're open to signals from elsewhere.
Yeah.
Instead of when you're really hard focused on doing something, apparently writing with my left hand here, then you're not as open. That almost closes your higher self off to a degree, thinking too hard.
Or especially stressing out about it.
Yeah, yeah, especially stressing out about it.
Usually thinking too hard means tension, means stress.
Yeah.
Then your nervous system is basically kind of in that.
Yeah, almost the whole. If you picture yourself or someone thinking too hard, thinking really hard about something, it is a.
Well, you're really, almost like right.
Yeah,
there's this.
You're closed off. You're stressed out. You're not thinking too hard in a light and airy way. It's really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Dreams also are. A dream just being a function of neurons alone is also hard for me to sell.
Right. I mean,
prophetic dreams, especially.
Yeah.
Or like shared dreams. There have been once or twice where we have had the same dream on the same night, and that's really weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No. I guess maybe now that we have like set up this idea of like, how could this be any other way? Mm-hmm. We will actually go into the way it actually is. Like this, maybe arc it like that.
Now that we've sold it.
Well, no. Now that we have, I guess, presented a thesis statement for how can it not, right? Right. Here's all these reasons of how could this be any other way. Maybe now we'll talk about what it actually is. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, maybe we have done that a little bit, but yeah. So to your point, right? Whenever we are in that open nervous system, non-stressed out state, right? Like whenever entire system is actually open, I would say like you could say that your Kundalini channel is opened, or you could say that your chakras are expanded, or you can say that your stress level is low, therefore you're feeling happy. And then therefore, like, like you can go into that little buzz state, right? Like, do you know what I mean? Like we get the buzz state whenever we do. Do you get the buzz state whenever you do Kundalini or yoga?
No, not really. Not really.
Oh, wow.
I get lightheaded sometimes, but that's not. I don't know that that's it.
Interesting. Yeah. So anyway, we'll have to work on that one. Yeah. So if you've done enough, basically the channels are open. The electromagnetic channels are open whenever your entire system is basically kind of like cracked open, and then you have this amazing amount of electrical current running basically all the way from the base, right from the root, or like in the Tai Chi and Qigong they talked about having 3 dantians, and so your lower dantian in your stomach center, right? Well, they go when you do Tai Chi, you do feel the energy, right?
Yeah.
So it's that, except that if you have enough of it, it gets really buzzy. Like I can quite literally feel, like whenever I shock you, I can feel the electrical shock. Just not, it's not a shock, but just going up my spine, and then it just basically comes out of here, and then with me, I have a different connection than most people. I guess most people feel it through their crown, and then with me, I have my ultra major chakra activated, and so a lot of things come in and out of my ultra major. Yeah, right. And so that supercharged amount of electrical current that you have running, right, is quite literally your antenna. I cannot describe it any other way, because when that's high, I can go into altered states of being, right? Like, people say that mushrooms and ayahuasca and other LSD, I guess, right, secrete or cause your body to secrete more DMT than normally.
Well, ayahuasca is DMT.
Yeah. Oh, is it is DMT?
Yeah.
Okay, so inserts on DMT.
Well,
I thought it has to do with so it's just a percentage of DMT.
Ayahuasca is DMT, the active ingredient, but LSD and mushrooms are it's not DMT. It's a different chemical.
Okay, but it's not. So naturally, there's a DMT secretion within your brain.
Yes, your pineal gland secretes DMT.
Yeah, right. So when I'm just comparing it to a psychedelic experience, not the LSD experience. I don't know anything about that, but like plant medicine experience, as opposed to active Kundalini flow experience, and then as opposed to no electrical currents being hijacked up, right? And the primary difference is when you have this heightened amount of DMT within you, when you have this Kundalini flow, you quite literally have what I would call this radio station upgrade, to where, right, whenever we're on mushrooms, right, now other shit happens. Like there's side effects. So mushrooms give you that, but then there's this whole other side effect. And ayahuasca had that side effect less. So in ayahuasca, right, we had that, like, oh, I just know things. All of a sudden, the knowing is the primary focus. Like, there's no question.
Right.
You just know things.
Right. And on mushrooms too.
Yes, but the mushrooms come with the distraction of other things, right? Because they spike the system so much. This is what, maybe to clarify this. This is how it happened for you versus how it happened for me. On ayahuasca, the difference between ayahuasca and mushrooms is the amount of noise, or the shadow work that comes in together with the knowing is a lot. Like mushrooms just rip that door open, and there's the knowing, which is this clear channel into all knowing. But at the same time, because mushrooms are very earthly based current, it brings in, and here's everything that's keeping you away from this knowing. Here's the knowing, and here's everything that keeps you blind to thereof. And so the goal is to unravel this in order to facilitate that. That's basically what the cyclical nature of a mushroom is.
Okay.
right? Versus with ayahuasca, the forced process, at least for us, no, we have only done it once. So I'm not saying other people seem to have really been in a different state of being than we were. So maybe Mama Ayahuasca was very grateful or graceful to us than most people. But the amount of noise that it opened up for us, at least for me, was not much. It was amazing, and it opened up this whole other thing, but the knowing was still at the forefront.
Yeah. I mean, my third, fourth, whatever, the most recent mushroom experience was the roughest by far, by 100 times rougher than any others, just in the amount of trauma that it brought up. But yeah, I mean, the ayahuasca, it brought up, oh, here's your control issues. Look here, there's your control issues. It did that too. But in all of them, there is this like, see, it's like afterward you say it, and even if I intellectually know, ooh, time and space, this is an illusion. That isn't something that if the 3D body feels, right? It's like, oh no, this is hard, and well, we got to go get to the office and whatever because it's time, right? If time and space feel incredibly real right now,
less and less so.
But on mushrooms, oh no, they don't. It is super obvious that they're an illusion. It is so clear, and then afterward you're like, but what? It makes so much sense. It's so clear. It is just 100%. You're 100% certain.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. When the channel is open, your electrical channel is open, past the idea that you are a closed circuit, right? And the mushrooms blow that idea out, and the ayahuasca blows that idea out. Not through intent, just through the mere nature of that is what the chemical compounds do to your system. And then if you do Kundalini and you do Kundalini right, and you do yoga and do yoga left, and you allow the circuit to be open, it does the exact same thing. And so what it does, if we refer to consciousness as basically an electrical field, right? That is like a receiver, right? They're able to tune into some extended version of self. To begin with, just how your body works, right? Just to begin with, the body needs electricity to function, right? So we're functioning electrically as a baseline, period. This is normal scientific belief. This is not, woo-woo stuff. But then what that electrical current does, it also acts as an antenna. And everybody has said that, but that's considered more woo-woo. Then acts as something, right? But that something, and I think we have said this in the podcast before, is yourself. Actually the true extended notion of yourself, and what I would then classify as a larger portion of your actual consciousness, right? So you get to the larger chunk of your consciousness whenever you recognize and kind of just like even start peeking through the doors of this greater knowing, right?
Yeah.
And so that's like just opening yourself to idea, wait, I'm not this box. I'm not this box of beliefs that runs this one circuit of, I say one circuit, but 5 circuits of bullshit, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm something greater. So you have to, once you step into that belief, then you open to your idea that the consciousness or you is something greater than this box. And when you open into that and basically spend enough time working your way into enlightened state of being or expanded state of being, you recognize, oh no, I am huge. I'm huge. The amount of consciousness that I have possibly cannot even be defined. But then through that conscious me, the idea that is larger than I can even imagine, I then have access to all knowledge and all information, including, time, space, multiverse,
future, past,
the idea that that's not a thing,
right. Remote viewing, all
just to everything.
Yeah.
Right. And right, when we start then looking at consciousness from its true standpoint, right? Recreation of that consciousness, right, then would simply kind of have to repivot and would go, if we are simply an antenna, then our idea of recreating consciousness or understanding consciousness would have to be, are we capable of creating a system that is an antenna that pipes into something greater than us? And then what is that relay station that allows the knowledge that we get to get interpreted into a form that is our physicality, and then that form be able to manipulate, process, derive, and then, conjure up that knowledge as Elliot, and thus behavior of Elliot. Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah.
Right. So the reason I say that is, if we had to start thinking of how to create intelligent artificial intelligence, or recreate an idea of human inside a robotic form, or just have an idea of human outside the form, technically all we are is this large receiver, right? Large electrical receiver, electromagnetic field that receives and then process information.
Right.
And then in this case, that information has a programmable intent of having a physical form that, some people would call it a lower entropy. Like Thomas Campbell refers to physical form as lower entropy. The entropy, yeah, lowers down, and then therefore we hold through our intent a physical form.
Right. There's no debate about, us being electromagnetic beings with an electromagnetic field. You can measure that, your brain and your heart too, which is even stronger than your brain, has a field, right?
Yeah.
That is not a debated fact.
Yeah.
And so if two people especially get in proximity of each other, right, the fields will therefore interact. I don't see how that would be debatable either. Which to me goes a long way toward explaining, like, if you go into a room full of people whose emotional state is happy or sad or whatever, that group of people is going to, without you doing anything else, pull you in that direction, up or down.
Yeah.
So you go to a party and everyone's happy, that lifts you up. What is it that lifts you up? I think it's the emotional state of everybody else vibrating out their happiness, their joy, their positive outlook, and you're picking it up. You go into, school on finals day and everyone's, and even if you're not, you kind of get sucked down into that.
Mm-hmm.
You meet your friend for lunch and they're having a good day or a bad day. You will feel it. That, to me, that is a function of consciousness that cannot be explained localized in the brain. I know there's mirror neurons and whatever, and we just mirror other people. I know that. But even without, I think you could put a blindfold on somebody and put, sound dampening headphones on somebody and sit them in the middle next to a whole bunch of depressed people, and they will feel worse.
Yeah.
And or put them next to a whole bunch of happy people and they will feel better without any sort of ability, 3D ability to mirror, if you can't see them and you can't hear them and you can't smell them, and you can't taste them, you can't touch them, how would you mirror them? Right? In a purely 3D world. But I believe you would. I think you're going to sense it. And that sense is not, it's your consciousness is tapping into their consciousness. Your higher self and their higher self are going, hey, we're in a bad mood, so you should be too. And it's coming out to you. Something like that.
Yeah. But it's, I mean, right, when you're a receiver and you're receiving a signal of cumulative consciousness, a cumulative group or morphic field,
Mhm.
and that morphic field, let's say, is depressed, you know, what it is, the state of that being is an electrical signature. It's like an electrical pathway, right?
Mhm.
Um,
The lately there have been a handful of events that have really gotten at least the American public either really excited or really depressed. And I think you too can just feel it in the air that there's a lot of either excitement or anxiety going on. And that's not looking at the news. That's not, talking to anybody. It's just there. You can just feel it.
yeah.
You go down to the grocery store and it's like, oh,
Or like on the
apparently
snow day, right? Like whenever people go to the grocery store on
Yeah.
a snow day, like it is, if you're at all intuitive, you go in, you're like, oh my God, everyone's scared
Right,
and running for milk and bread.
But even not knowing that it's a snow day, you walk in just going,
Yeah.
what is up with everybody? And it's like, oh, and then you hear about the snow day and then you're like, okay, well, that's it. But before knowing that, you
Mhm.
still feel it and you're like, oh, this is awful.
Yeah. But you have to, I mean, one, obviously you have to be intuitive enough to be open to the idea that if this is how I feel, this is my vibratory state, you have to be aware of it, right? And then two, then you have to be able to come in and then be open enough into awareness to recognize that something is changing your vibratory state. But this is not rocket science. This is just going, oh, look, I went from feeling X, which was happy, to feeling Y, which was, oh, it seems like it's some sort of pressure on the system.
Constriction.
Yeah. Because the nervous system, it just starts to constrict. But what it is through that lower entropy, right? Your nervous system is just basically shutting down into lower and lower and lower vibratory state.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, if you're in that lower and lower vibratory state, and we have spent, thousands of years, hundreds of years being there, to some extent, all of our scientific thinking and knowledge by default could only have come through out of the state that we were allowing ourselves to go. Do you see what I mean? So if the science world is doing research and then they're trying to identify or computate consciousness, if you're in the closed circuit state of being, that the only conclusions you can derive from would be out of this closed state of being. But if the scientific researchers are doing study into ideas of consciousness and they're open to the larger idea of consciousness, then by default, their findings would derive different results.
Yeah.
Because you're accessing a larger scope of consciousness. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we are by default putting down on paper conclusions that totally make sense and on paper seem quite right and like there's nothing else out there, solely based on the vibratory state of our own. I mean, like each particular scientist, or let's be honest, scientific group, who will choose a cumulative level of the mean level of consciousness that they choose to vibrate on based on the lowest person's lower entropy.
Yeah.
And then on the highest person's entropy being dragged down, right? So the mean will just drag in, and this will be the conclusion of the paper.
Right. And then on the other end, we have, something like the Monroe Institute or the, Center for Noetic Sciences or
the Heart Math Institute.
Heart Math Institute, who the people running that are not as closed off. They're quite open to well, we don't necessarily know. So we're not going to say that this is definitely constrained to, inside of the skull. We're going to say, well, maybe, but maybe there's other stuff.
Yeah.
So we'll leave it open and, now what explains it?
Yeah, but think about the research that they're doing, the scientific inquiry, and then thus the possibility of the result by default starts out at the higher level of interpretation because they're outside of this locked box of reality.
Yeah.
When you were inside your locked box of reality and you were not aware or anything, the the most conclusion you can come up with quite literally reflects your personal vibratory field and interpretation thereof.
Right. And even during that time,
and to you, you feel like you were right.
Well, during that time, I would get downloads of music. I would get downloads of words and stuff like my whole life when I go to sleep, and sometimes when I wake up, it's like a story, a narrated story plays out in my head in a way that doesn't feel like it's local.
Yeah.
Now I can say that it doesn't feel local. I wish I could ask myself back then, does that feel local? It doesn't feel like it's being generated by my mind, by my brain inside my head.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like I am being told a story.
But yeah, because you're open into a higher level.
Right. But that has happened to me my entire life. Well, back when I was 180 degrees the other way, that no. It is all here. But I had the same experience.
Yeah, but
I don't know how I would have explained that back then.
I mean, psychosis.
So yeah, no, actually, you're right. It is, yes, because I was quite sure I was borderline psychotic.
Yeah, this is what I wanted to point out, and this is something that.
Yes, you're right. That I've conveniently buried that memory away.
This is something that, our previous episode, 2 episodes talked about positive psychosis, and then like the second episode was basically like, once you recognize all these positive psychoses that you created in order to be able to cope with yourself forward, right? In order to soothe the nervous system in this way, after you have basically shut yourself off from all the intuitive or most of intuitive functionality. Actually, functionality, I'm not even saying intuitive like extrasensory perception or psychic powers. I just accessing your full version of self, right? Your psychosis is had you shut it off, right? In order to survive, right? I'm kind of overarching my book now. But then sooner or later, when you start to recognize, wait, I am functioning at like 0.1% of my actual self. Like I am quite literally just running this closed circuit loop, and I'm not even opening up to the larger ideas and understandings of much less myself, but then also much less the rest of the world, like the truth, right? The truth that is actually out there. This is very interesting, and this is basically what I thought was like, wow, how clever are we once again? Because you have spent so much time suppressing your intuitive system into opening, right, into full-blown functionality, and you locked yourself up into this closed-circuit psychosis, right, to survive, I will say to survive, anything that then comes in from the other world or like me to you, right, to begin with, and then tells you, oh, guess what? Like I have an electrical current running through me and I can zap you with it. Or like, oh yeah, and then there's a show where this guy in Thailand, he can do the same thing, right? And then I come to you and say, that's the truth. And guess what? That's also your truth. And Jesus walking on water, that's also real because, basically he's tapping into larger potential of his higher self, and he's able to defy the parameters of our 3-dimensional world and is accessing 4th and 3-dimensional consciousness. And then therefore, yeah, we can all technically walk on water if we ever reach that level. When I say that to you, if you are in this locked box of safety that basically closes off to you this limited belief of reality because it feels safe, then what I'm saying to you is psychosis.
Yeah.
And for you to believe into that would also mean, oh, fuck, I'm now psychotic as well.
Yeah.
So you take your real self that you were born with, right? Up until the age of 5 or 7, whatever you want to believe. And you create false sense of security through narrative psychosis, right? Like, oh, I have to believe these things in order to have my box, my life of experience be so limiting because otherwise I'm under constant threat. And you, in our case, I'm just propagating. I'm not saying these numbers are correct. These are just our experiences. And in our case, you propagate that psychosis from age of 5 until age of 35. So 30 years, in order to have a very limited expression of what you will actually accept as your truth. And that limited expression is there keeping you safe, because anything outside of this box feels very, very unsafe. But outside of this box is, one, your higher self, access to greater knowledge, access to information that is actually very truth and very much part of your world that you're refusing to admit to.
Mhm.
But it doesn't feel safe because you can put labels on it. It feels out of control. It feels unknown. And because no one actually spends time talking about the fact that you have done this
Right.
and everybody else is doing this feels very normal.
Right.
And the second somebody comes and goes, oh, guess what? I had this paranormal experience and I saw a ghost, or, oh, I can zap people with my hands. Those people are psychotic. And fuck no, I will not take that psychotic
Right.
nature, and I will actually admit to me being able to do that, because guess what? Me being branded as psychotic is quite literally unsafe to my own well-being.
Yeah.
And so even though currently you're running a system of psychosis, you will never admit to yourself running a system of psychosis, because that's within itself unsafe. And so anybody else saying something that threatens the system of psychosis is perceived unsafe. Therefore, you brand them as psychotic, not recognizing that you are actually the psychotic one.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it.
Which is
And you know,
diabolical, because this is the key to why most people choose not to awaken, enlighten, go through gnosis, or reach higher levels of dimensionality.
yeah. And you know, societally, especially in like, you know, modern Western society, you know, we've all collectively agreed that these things are normal and okay, and anything outside this box is psychotic.
Yeah.
And so, you know, most people growing up inherited these norms that, you know, okay, you know, I'm not even going to go to, you know, whether or not Jesus really, really did it or not. But certainly, you know, anybody else is just, you know, they're worst case making it up. Best case, they really believe it, but they're just crazy.
Yeah, there's like a...
Yeah.
Yeah. But think about how diabolical this system is, to where you used to have these higher realms of perception.
Yeah.
You used to have these experiences. At some point, you trained yourself that me running my intuition is threatening, right? 2 podcasts ago, right? And then therefore, it is too much information and too much knowledge, and I cannot rely on my own self to go forward, right? I have to close off the circuit to this limited experience, limited belief of self. And then you program yourself into it so hard, because that is the safety mechanism that we run with, that by default, this is how crazy it is, that at some point, you actually flip the narrative of what is psychosis, and then you perceive the truth to be the psychosis.
Right. I mean, think about how open everybody was as children. The imagination, the, you know, imaginary friends, the these, you know, there were no unsolvable problems. How do we solve this? Add more rockets. There's a solution to everything, you know, right? How do we get to just more rockets? That's right. That's how we get to the moon, right? It's solvable as a kid, you know. Now, as adults, you know, well, you know, more rocket. We gotta have fuel. We gotta do this and that, and then, you know, we start coming up with all the ways that it doesn't work, and we just shut down. We, oh well, you know, nobody else seems to have imaginary friends, so I let mine go. Nobody else seems to be, you know, talking to themselves, so I should probably stop doing that. Whatever it is.
But those are the obvious ones.
Those are the obvious ones.
But the really, really important one is, I have this vast amount of information and knowledge and knowing and potentiality of what I can do to express myself in this physical form through things outside of conventional knowledge. And the second you recognize that this is outside of conventional knowledge or conventional thinking or conventional belief, then you go, oh, heck, if I say this to anybody, I would be branded as psychotic. Therefore, the majority of people out there must be not psychotic, and I am the outlier. Therefore, I must shut off my power.
Right. Which
is the quite the opposite of what should happen.
There's this social pressure to
not let people know you have imaginary friends.
Yeah, to regress to the mean, and the mean is nobody's got imaginary friends. Nobody talks to themselves. Nobody gets downloads. Everything's explainable by with a microscope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but the entire system has been rigged. We will not go into the details of why. For each individual, quite literally, for each individual being, and I'm not even saying you have to believe what we're saying, but if you're listening, think about how many things that you had honest experiences with that you cannot deny, that you discounted away with whatever excuse. It doesn't even matter what excuse with. And then you put into this bucket of, I don't want to really talk about it. They're just weird because I didn't even know where to place it. But the truth is, that is the bucket where all of your reality actually is.
There's a quote I heard from Alan Watts, who said something along the lines of, you can either believe that nothing is conscious, right? Nothing is there's no magic. Nothing's conscious. We're just a whole bunch of electrons and electric signals and whatever, and that's it. We're fancy computers, and so is everything else, down to a dog and a cat and a rock, right? Or everything is conscious. Everything is magical, and we have these abilities that come from who knows where, can't be explained, or at least we can't explain them now. But, a cat is also conscious and a rock is conscious. Maybe it's a lesser version of consciousness, but if you hit a rock with a hammer, it makes a sound. It, quote, knows how to make a sound. That's built into the consciousness of the rock based on the rock's size and shape and composition or whatever. Right? Squeaky chair. Now even, I think he goes on to say, even regardless of whether one is right or wrong, accurate or not, it sure is a lot more fun to live in a world where everything is conscious. It's just more fun if everything is conscious. It is beneficial, even if it's not accurate, to believe that you live in a world where everything is conscious. It is beneficial to you and your life and your soul because of how open that feels.
The expensive nature of the energetic field.
Right.
Think about what it feels.
And this
to start to narrow down parameters and start thinking narrower and narrower and narrower, right, as opposed to start expanding your parameters and goes, what else is out there that is possible that I have not, one, faced, or two, allowed to be there.
Right. And I don't see this as just, fake it till you make it, believe it for the sake of, believing it. But I think there's really something to that.
Well, you don't have to fake it till you make it. I think the only thing you have to do in order to be able to go into the field of more potential for yourself, not for sake of anybody else, or to one, if nothing else, to start to be happier in your life, is to actually go into the spots of your personal being where you had these experiences that normal world would have considered abnormal.
Mm-hmm. Something, quote, unexplained.
Unexplained, right? Unsolved, right? Whatever.
Yeah.
And start facing your reality as that. I would bet that there's probably almost no people on Earth out of 8 billion of us right now, or 9.2, that have not had this at least one time, some sort of experience where you went, that was strange. I can't really explain that.
What story would it be super awkward and embarrassing and uncomfortable to tell to your boss? Not some personal traumatic story, but some experience that you had that would be unexplainable. Right.
No, but think about this.
More
people want to share those than anything else. You get so excited to share those stories.
Right.
Even though for the most part, depending on the circle that you roll in, I shouldn't say that because they're going to think I'm crazy. But that is your truth.
Right.
The fact that you had that story, the fact that you had your experience, that is where your truth is buried. And unless you choose to live in that truth, you're living a lie.
Yeah. It reminds me of all the scientists, archaeologists who seem to, especially archaeologists, who seem to like selectively discount evidence because it doesn't fit their model of the world. And I'm going to specifically talk about all of Graham Hancock's detractors, right? Because it's like he's got all this evidence, and he goes out of the way to say that he is not saying that, you know, there's definitely a civilization 35,000 years ago that lives here. He's saying here's stuff that is really, really old, that is unexplainable by the current model. We should probably investigate.
Or open our eyes,
or open our eyes to the possibility that there's something that we don't know yet.
Mm-hmm.
Here are mounds in the middle of the Amazon rainforest that as we go and, you know, deforest it, these mounds emerge that are, you know, I don't remember what he dated them at, 10,000, 20,000 years old or something. Right? But, you know, modern archaeology is like, nope, the people weren't there back then, so end of story. And it's like, they're just like, no, they're so closed off that they can't even open themselves to the possibility of looking into the phenomenon. I'm not saying except it was definitely people 20,000 years ago.
Yeah, but
it may be, maybe not. But something formed these, you know, geometric. They're clearly human-made mounds. You can just look at them and tell.
Which is, yeah, it's not a natural formation.
Yeah, there's shapes. There's all kinds. Thousands of these. You know, watch his show on Netflix. Link in the description. But the modern archaeology is just closed off to even looking at it because it conflicts with the current model of the history of humanity. And that's almost like an institutionalized version of what every individual does to themselves.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, I had an imaginary friend when I was young, and I saw my imaginary friend, right? Elliot, personally saw my imaginary friend. I know exactly what he looks like.
It's so funny you say he, and I just interpret it as a she.
Oh, it was a he. I know exactly what he looks like. But you know, after that, oh no, you know, I was just making it up, right? I'm just going to pretend that I didn't see it, or you know, oh, well, you know, on the unexplained episode, you know, that drawer closed, and I'm just gonna when nobody was there, and I heard a drawer close.
Yeah, well,
I'm just gonna. I can't explain it. I'm just going to kind of pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah, but think about this. All of those instances are, you imagine your friend, you walking around talking about your imaginary friend, and then others not seeing your imaginary friend makes you not like everybody else. Therefore, it's unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
And you hearing a door close and being 100% sure about it makes you feel unsafe because there's no explanation behind it, and that is perceived danger.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these things are just like, I just feel unsafe whenever I go into this environment, either directly by going, oh, doors closing and chandeliers swinging and chairs floating in the air, just feels unsafe. Therefore, I will push this into the no-no square and I won't look there, right? Because it's quite literally physically threatening at that point, because if something can close doors and I can't see them, how am I supposed to protect myself, right? And the other half of it is, I do believe that is my truth, but saying it to others is going to make me be alienated from this tribe, and then therefore unsafe, unlovable in your case, and then unsafe. Do you see what I mean? So all of these boxes, all of these personal psychoses into closed circuit functionality, where a system is just a closed circuit and we're not open to anything else. Our consciousness is perceived and then locked and then being defined as this box and nothing else, is what we devolve into, really kind of like shut ourselves off to, in order to have a very limited perception of one consciousness, which is our higher self, and then much less cumulative consciousness because past our dimensionality, all other species, humanoid species and even non-humanoid species, draw their knowledge from collective information banks, which we don't have access to. Well, I mean, we do have access to, but when we close ourselves off, we don't. And so all of our information has to be relearned, and we feel excited about it, and it's brand new, whenever we do learn it. But what are we doing? We're just, we finally got out of our way and opened up to this collective consciousness where there's such thing as calculus or ant movies, or exploration of asteroids in space. Do you see what I mean? That's all that is. And it's interesting, because Hollywood, in some form, almost like
that's our outlet.
Allows this exploratory, like when you write fiction, right? When Philip K. Dick wrote his fictional story about his fictional character who gets downloads from fictional people. That is the only way that society thus far has allowed the narrative to be opened into
socially acceptable way.
Yes. But the truth is, that is somebody stepping into some version of collective consciousness, open-minded consciousness, databanks of information, seeing into the future, right? Or I say into the future, but just seeing into a space,
right?
That, we could define as future if we go back to three-dimensional form here and can continue to function here.
Right. And the fact that there's, while there's infinite stories, there's only so many stories. There's only so many story archetypes, right? They all, you could take every movie through the history of movies and you could probably put them into 20, 30 buckets of like, everyone, they've got the hero and then there's a bad guy and then they have to fight him and they have to, there's a hero's journey on almost every single one of them. It could be reduced to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the nature of humanity trying to process its psyche.
Yeah, but where I was going is that this speaks to the collective consciousness of us that we all share these stories.
The stories, So the story is actually there because the collective consciousness has a net programmable outcome that they want us to reach, which is gnosis, self-awareness. And so that collective consciousness, the hero's journey, is basically the narrative in which the universe or your higher self is offering you as an story arc, your personal adventure arc of how you would go to access your higher self.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's there because that is the software that we could tap into, or like a process that we could tap into that actually gives us, just like a computation of sequencing of numbers is an idea. In the same way, the hero's journey is an idea of how you might come to compute your personal self-awareness, self-awakening.
Right. And different versions of that, as in different movies, will resonate
stories
with different people because, I can really see myself as Luke Skywalker. Oh, I could really see myself as, so-and-so in this movie. Right. Small side note, in the 50s, there really started to be a lot of extraterrestrial movies made. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of thought that is, on purpose, because that's when extraterrestrials really started visiting Earth.
Oh, it's because that's the time we decided that we were going to start blowing ourselves up.
Yeah, and so through Hollywood, there was a quote soft disclosure going on.
It started to happen, and then all of a sudden, it did not.
Right, and it was like, here, all these things that like we can't say explicitly, we the government can't say explicitly or whatever, ended up coming out through Hollywood as a way to kind of maybe prepare people for an eventual full disclosure. Like it, but then again, there's alien movies where they're good. Let's say the Day the Earth Stood Still. Well,
they came here to wipe out Earth.
They're not evil aliens. And then there's Independence Day, where those are actually literal evil aliens trying to destroy humanity for the sake of destroying humanity, or War of the Worlds. Those are bad aliens. There's good alien movies, or at least they have a higher. They're not here to maliciously kill people, and then on other movies they are here to maliciously kill people.
It's funny.
Star Trek, right? They're not bad aliens. We work with them.
Are there any bad aliens for Star Trek? Like, do they ever come across bad?
Sometimes. I mean, there's. It's almost like there's like a intergalactic geopolitics, and it's like we just don't, the humans and like the Klingons don't necessarily see eye to eye, and the Klingons are an aggressive race of extraterrestrials, and so we'll maybe fight him and stuff, but it's not like we want to exterminate the Klingons in the same way that like this country maybe wants to exterminate that. It's more like United States and Russia don't see eye to eye right now, and so there's tensions, but it's not like we don't want to go kill every Russian, and Russians don't want to go literally kill every American. It's not like that. It's just we don't agree on everything.
Yeah.
It's really just like, oh, here's a version of the we're talking about Earth, but we're going to pretend it's in space. And then it makes it really obvious that, these tensions between cultures are stupid.
I mean, that's one way, but another way is just like, well, here's also disclosure.
I mean, yes, but
geopolitical.
At the same time, it is bathed in soft disclosure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
We might have gone off consciousness a little bit.
No, but maybe that's the path to go. The ideas of extraterrestrials, I don't know. Maybe I notice. This is what I noticed within just like my developmental process. As you start the process of awareness or spiritual awakening or gnosis or whatever you want to call it, right? There's these arcs of understanding, like, right? Like, it's almost like you go into the arc, but after you go into this arc, then like it bumps up to the next level, right? And I would say that is because as you allow yourself to be opened to more things, then through that acceptance, more things are able to come into your knowing of truth.
Yeah,
right.
No, absolutely.
And so, like remember a couple of months ago when a lot of like when we went to Canary Islands, the energy frequency of the Canary Islands had Arcturians just completely come into my forefront, right? And I experienced other species, but at the time when they came in, I think that was a shocker to you because that was a new level of psychosis, right? Do you know what I mean? And to me, I was like, well, as I'm opening to more of me, right? Basically my electromagnetic field that I'm able to access, that is actually the truth of me, it's not growing. I'm just opening to the larger scope of it.
Right,
like It's already there. You just have basically kind of like open into the new layers of onions. So instead of de-onioning, you expanding your onion, let's say, right? In the positive way. Sooner or later, just like when you first, let's say you're completely closed-minded and you basically are locked in this little box and you think your own little circuit and you think that nothing touches you from the outside and nothing's touching you. And, this toe hurting only means that this toe hurts. And it does not mean that there's actually a nerve that is shooting from your spine. Do you remember, like, we had those conversations as well, right? If you're living in that circuit, for me to come into you and to say, oh, there's the Arcturians over there, and then there's the Galactic Federation, and then there's the Syrians over there, and, hunky dory, this is like next level crazy. You would like, right, complete shutdown, because the amount of threat that you would feel to just receive an idea that you might, experience a ghost at some haunted house, and that's actually seems to be true. I'm not saying all haunted houses are true, but like you have some sort of supernatural experience. If you can't even open up into that, the idea of extraterrestrials and Lyrans and Arcturians and like galactic federations is just like next level. Do you see what I mean? So you're only going to receive the information that your physical form will allow you to not be threatened with.
Yeah, well, I think it's like ever so slightly more than that. You get like 2% more than whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
But then you can take that, and if anything between 0 and 100 is fine, because that's within your established base of normal reality. But as soon as you hit the 101 or 102%, it's whether or not you go, well, let's welcome this. Or at least let's not outright reject it.
Yeah.
And then, then you can grow it. Otherwise, you just, nope, no, that's too much. And you just keep trying to cut it off right there. I think everybody gets, a couple % more than they're comfortable with. But then based on what they do, they can either expand their comfort zone or they can just try to nip it right there.
Yeah. But that's the whole point of spiritual growth or gnosis or awakening, is your conscious mind or subconscious programming will always offer you the next nugget of information to allow you to open into the next state of your expanded electrical field, right? It's always trying to get you to expand more into your own self.
Right.
You're not going anywhere other than expanding more into yourself.
Right. And that could be in the form of, well, I was okay with ghosts, but I'm not okay with aliens. Okay, now I'm okay with aliens, but I'm not okay with, I don't know what.
Many aliens.
Multiple species of aliens. It could be that, or it could be like, oh, well, I'm not okay with, dealing with what happened to me when I was a kid, but now I can start to accept that. It could be in multiple different directions, and I think it's all the same thing.
No, it's all the same thing, but what I want to say is the more time you spend to, it just comes down to, this is your line of self, right? Like, and you're just electrical circuit going up. And in order for you to be able to go up, you have to dump the density. Mm-hmm. You have to increase what if it's lower entropy, which is the density, right? Is that higher entropy or?
I think that's higher entropy.
Okay, yeah. So it's basically frequency. I don't actually, Thomas Campbell uses that word, but basically, you have to lighten your frequency in order to access higher frequency information. But in order to do that, you have to offset with basically, this huge chunk of concrete that is holding your frequency down. So the more time you spend doing trauma processing and releasing this limited belief system that makes you think you're this closed circuit, the more you open up to yourself being a large, not a closed circuit.
Yeah.
And then the more you dump, the more you're able to go higher and higher and higher in the access of your consciousness. And this is when I, again, go back to consciousness, access of your consciousness. But your consciousness, again, is this unlimited field of knowing, one, knowledge or what you want to call it, but then also truth. It is unequivocal truth to you.
Yeah.
And if you have a limited amount of truth that you can perceive, it is because your safety mechanism that has been set up there as this belief system to protect you away from all the things that are unknown, therefore unsafe, or all the things that make you seem crazy, therefore it's unsafe. That is what basically the block is. The block is you only get the 2%, and then the test is, are you willing to start opening up to this concept, or you go, oh shit, the ghost thing was okay, and maybe the pet psychic was okay, but this alien shit is next level.
Right.
Speaking from experience.
Yeah. And that's not to say that, you are open to that every crazy thing you hear is true, right? There's the guy who started up birds aren't real. Birds are some sort of, every bird out there is actually like a CIA robot that's flying around spying on people. And he started that. And then people grabbed onto it and they're like, yeah, that's right. And he's like, no, it's not right. I was just making a joke. They're like, yeah, that's exactly what someone would say when they're trying to cover it up. And it turned into some crazy thing. And we've seen enough dead birds that it was like, yes, those birds are actually filled with, guts, not electronics and gears. Right. But there's like this
knowing,
but I'm like,
but this goes back to that psychedelic
there's
openness.
My reaction to that birds are robots is very different from my reaction to dog psychic. Right? I can just tell that my reaction to the two is very different. And so intuitively, I'm like, okay, well, this one's just baloney, but this one hurts more, or I can feel the charge more. Maybe there's actually something there.
Well, you can feel the charge more because your body is bulking to this concept because it is registering itself as unsafe.
Yeah.
That's the difference, is you have to recognize that when you hear something, and that something is in Graham Hancock's way, right? Like, oh, guess what? The enclosure of the Sphinx quite literally places the building of the pyramids to 12,000, if not 30,000 years ago. That is threatening to you because the entire human history of our development and advanced progression has to be scrapped and rethought.
Right.
And that is threatening. Now, most people go, well, it's not really threatening. I don't care. No, deep down, your psyche has rejected all of those concepts because somehow deep down through the childhood trauma, this box that is a no square that you basically close yourself off from, your consciousness has deemed that as unsafe. Because it could be as simple as, well, shoot, if I start to believe this, because it is not threatening to me. Like, us having to rewrite human history does not seem threatening. It would just, on the surface, it's not. But here's where the dotted line to the thread comes in. Well, if I tell other people that I agree with Graham Hancock,
there you go.
They will brand me as crazy and then psychotic, and then therefore I'm out of the tribe of safety.
Yeah.
And that feels threatening. And that's where the truth actually is.
I think a lot of it is in that social pressure of, even if I want to believe this, I can't, or I certainly can't publicly because then, then I'm the crazy one, then I'm out of the tribe. And then, I know that if I believe this, that opens the door to whatever the next thing is too. So I need to nip this in the bud and just say, okay, well, whatever's in this book that we all agree is true, that's the end of the truth. There's nothing else to be discovered. We can put away our pickaxes and stop digging for stuff because we know it all. Don't worry about it. That's it.
Yeah. But most of that is not obviously unsafe in the direct way of like, seeing a ghost opens up to the potential, wait, if they can lift a chair and they can hover there in the air, can they lift me? And then I can experience physical harm from this entity? That is direct unsafety that you would go,
sure.
Oh yeah, I'm not going to believe in that because there is so many unknowns that I don't even know how to deal with.
Yeah.
But most of it is sneaky because the unsafety lays in.
Oh my gosh, all physics is out of the window now. Now things can float without any sort of, apparent propulsion. And,
that's obvious.
Yeah.
But the unobvious ones are, if I admit that Sphinx was not built in 2500 BC to other people, then the unsafety lies in that second remove field of, I'll just be ostracized for believing crazy shit. And then therefore, I'll never have friends, or I will be branded as an outsider and I will die alone. It's unsafe.
Yeah.
And so I will, stress this out more than anything. All of our issues stay and lay out of this unsafety. And we have design that box very cleverly to where we are not allowing ourselves to recognize that we are refusing something, or we're not wanting to believe in something, or are we rejecting something, or we are angry at something because it makes us feel unsafe. But when we recognize unsafety is what is actually driving my closed-minded behavior and actually keeps me shut off from the greater consciousness that is the consciousness of my greater truth, then you actually start to break through and open these little blindfolds to the idea of like, wait, maybe I have experienced something that is a true, that is my true, that now I can recognize that I rejected it in the past because it somehow felt unsafe, that I'm willing to face now. And then ... then you start walking into this path of greater knowledge, greater truth. That is the openness to consciousness. That is both you as greater consciousness, but then also you interpreting larger consciousness. And then there's all kinds of layers within there, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, the other aspects that I want to bring in is that, you know, the reason why we started contemplating this is there's a lot of talk about like, what does a human progression look like if this is the trajectory at which we are going on right now? Right. Meaning, like, I'm not trying to paint the future bleak, but, you know, some people are having very bleak conversation of what the future of humanity looks like, or existence of our planet looks like into the future, if we are continue to be on the trajectory that we are continuing to be on right now. And I would say this is really the answer to that question. We can either choose to believe falsely that we are this closed circuit box and everything is defined and branded and can be quantifiably explained by ideas of science that are only there as these brushstrokes attempts for safety. That's what science is this brushstrokes attempt for safety. Or it can be a pathway into the open version of our consciousness that could still be explored scientifically, but from the open-minded standpoint.
Yeah.
Where then we can actually start to touch on these unbelievable larger concepts of our reality that are already there. We're just simply shutting ourselves off from experience thereof.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are two problems with science today. One, people are not open to these possibilities outside of the current scientific model. And B, even if they were, there is no way, way to quote prove them. And maybe that's just a technology problem. I don't know how you would prove the stuff, but no one's going to try to prove it if they're not even open to the idea of that in the first place.
No. But listen to this. Here's. I'm
not even saying prove. I'm saying scientific research isn't happening because A, people aren't open to it, and B, what would be the methods to do that?
The proving is if you look at something being one way, and then you follow through this action that you might not understand, and then all of a sudden that something that was one way is now the other way, that is knowing, that is truth. And the only empirical evidence you need is to understand that here's this thing one way, which honestly all of the science is just us trying to explain something that already exists. We're not inventing new shit.
Right.
And if the new shit comes here...
Reality is what reality is.
Yeah.
And we just got to keep trying to
explain it.
Figure out more reality and then explain the reality as best we can. Yeah, but the truth
is the reality keeps on expanding as we keep on expanding our conscious understanding thereof, right? So science is only trying to explain something that is already there, and we're trying to re-engineer our understanding of it. That is all we have done so far. In fact, that is all we're continuing to do so far. But what I'm saying is there's another way to approach science, is to go, hey, here's what the potential is, and here's what the frequency of that experience is. How do we bring that frequency into this reality? And that is what new science needs to be. Just like I know I can experience ghosts and ghosts are there. Instead of going, option one is fuck, I'm experiencing ghosts. I don't want to believe that they're there. Go, yes, there is such thing as ghosts and I can experience them. I might not be able to understand them. I might not be able to scientifically quantify what they actually are. I can have that conversation with somebody if anybody is interested. But the true scientific mind would then go, I know that this is the case. There are countless of people who had this experience. Heck, I might have even had this experience. How do I reach a plane of existence where I'm able to interact with those entities?
Right.
And that is true science.
Right.
Science is curiosity about the existence or potentiality of something that we do not yet understand, know that exists, or can touch or explain.
Right. Instead of just, oh, well, we're going to just say all these things, ghosts and telepathy and whatever. Nope. We're just going to draw a hard line and pretend that despite many people's personal experience with those, we're just going to go, nope, never mind. That doesn't exist. We're not going to even look into that. We're going to look over here, build a bigger collider.
Yeah. And so what, just, I will say a couple of examples of this. One, I do not remember the names of these people, but, you might, if you care about looking at it in the notes, but we saw this somewhere, or I read this somewhere. There was a gentleman who was a scientist, like a scientist, who basically did some incredible things with, I don't know, some kind of levitation or something. It was basically, he was a scientist, and then he kind of came across this niche where like, oh, all of a sudden I can levitate things. And I think it was levitation. And then and he had hundreds of people who saw him levitate stuff and do all this stuff, right? And document like, oh no, this guy is quite literally defining the parameters of gravity and current physical model of interpretation. And this is breakthrough. And this, I don't remember what, it was 50s, 60s or something like that.
Was that those like umbrella looking things?
I don't remember, but heavily documented, publicized, newspapers, just evidence and evidence and evidence, right? But he was a hardcore scientist, and then therefore people believed him because he was a scientist, and all of a sudden he was discovering something new, and then therefore, could not explain it, but was trying to explain it. Mm. I'm not saying this from the sexist standpoint at all, but I'm saying it from just implementary standpoint. And so just experiment over experiment where it was proven true, like, right? So as far as scientific documentation, if it goes, in order to have it believed to be real, then therefore documented, you had to have so many reiteration of it actually happening and blah, 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 right? And so it was just a miracle, right? And not a miracle, but it was scientifically proven and then thus repeatable. Therefore, it was just kind of being written into the books. And then, of course, there were the doubters that are like, oh, there's got to be something there, right? And he was right there. So basically, I'm not telling you what things are documented. Now I'm telling you what actually happened. And he was right there on the fringe to where he was scientific and he believed in this closed mind way of thinking. And then every so often, like I think the story went, like those experiments would not work. Like he would come in and then they wouldn't work, right? I think I have mentioned this on the podcast before, but I want to show this as an example in this case of what we're closing ourselves off from. And then it turns out, long story short, that the times where his experiments did not work is when his secretary was not there or his assistant was not there helping him. And then, so basically, it turned out that his frequency of vibration was, let's say, X, right? And it was quantifiable as, here's what I believe the parameters of physicality and science are capable to do, right? Because that is the extent of his conscious reach that he's able to have. And she was so happy about his personal success. She, I guess it was, I'm assuming, romantically invested into him being successful. that she brought in this infinite, right, electromagnetic wave of full potential. In this case, was just excitement for him to experience happiness and to be proven as this man of breakthrough in science, that she came in with an open electromagnetic field that was not closed off to his limited field of potential.
Yeah.
And because she comes in and then he comes in, she ends up raising his potential electromagnetic field of potentiality. And then therefore, the scientific experiment or the advanced technology that he's now experimenting with or is able to experience is the cumulative net mean of her and him combined, which is just enough to bump yourself in from this reality of experience into this reality of experience, where now you're experiencing what Earth at the time perceived as, oh my gosh, this is like crazy and supernatural. But she bumped up the electromagnetic field of potential into the next phase of reality that allowed us, and in fact, hundreds of people, to foresee an experiment that was outside of physical reality.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
But it is a quantifiable example of something being there as truth under circumstances of X, and then something not being there as truth under circumstances of Y. And I can tell you the only difference between those items is the vibrational frequency of net consciousness that you choose to operate in when you're doing scientific experiments.
I mean, and I think that is exactly the same thing as like there was the study back in was it like the 70s or the 60s or something where we'll get a whole bunch of people together and we'll all meditate on peace, either peace in the world or peace in a certain city. I don't remember. And then crime rates dropped after they did that. Mm-hmm. And it's exactly the same thing as Lynn Taggart's ongoing experiments.
Yeah.
And I had
Tesla.
I had another example with multiple people doing it too. I'm trying to remember what that was.
Tesla, right? Like, think about it. All the technologies that Tesla was delivering into our system when he was alive. I don't know what, 70s, 80s? I have no idea when. When was he alive?
Early 1900s.
Oh, sure. Whatever. Whenever that was. Wait, I thought, when did he die? I don't know when. Was it before World War II?
I thought so.
Okay.
Maybe.
Anyway, so yeah, let's say early 1900s. Tesla is like delivering these breakthrough revolutionary discoveries. They're like, oh my gosh, look at this. This is a vastly different way to look at reality. We're like, whoa, what the heck, right? Like
1943.
Died in 1943. Okay. Right? And we were like, wow, this is not anything like we have ever experienced before. What the heck? Right? And now he consciously admits to, at the time, basically getting this information from higher realms of consciousness. How did he get those information from higher realm of consciousness? He allowed himself to go into his conscious interpretation of reality outside of box of limited beliefs, and then basically expanded his net reach into higher conscious potential that is his truth, and then thus interaction with higher potential beings.
Yep.
That's it. Another example of it. I'm just laying it back. And now we're like, oh my gosh, what the heck? Now everybody who's fascinated with Tesla is like, I don't know what the fuck he was doing. Everybody's like in shock and awe of where in the fuck did that go? And why is it that we're not able to experience that, right? Well, yes, we're not able to experience that because quite literally through the pain body of World War II and the rhetoric that Ed inserted into us, we have spiked ourselves into ultimate fields of unsafety. And therefore, remediation away from anything that is quite literally branded as unsafe on multitude of waves of psychosis is that we have identified that unsafety. And so our personalized consciousness, I'm not saying you have to be a scientist, just our personalized consciousness has quite literally dumped itself into the dumps Because we are vibrating at this very much closed circuit of operation.
Yeah, yeah.
And only now people who are basically starting to explore these higher realms of knowledge start to go, wait, there's this information, there's this knowledge, there's this potentiality that I'm experiencing, right? That is different than the truth of most.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs is that, right? Steve Jobs is that example. And, he went to India, met with a guru, lived there for 3 months, 6 months. I don't know how long he lived. What did the guru do? He raised his electromagnetic field frequency to be open to potentiality of larger conscious interpretation. That's it. Like, there's no magic to it. And then he comes back to America that is very much closed-minded. The circuits are very closed.
Yeah.
But he comes in and he is able to keep his electromagnetic field expanded past the net person in America. And because he's so determined to have this field not be overridden by the Western world, he converts enough people into the crazy field of Steve Jobs, then enough people actually jump into his field of probability, as opposed to him.
There's a saying with Steve Jobs that when Steve Jobs would present or would walk into a room, he had a, quote, reality distortion field around him.
Okay.
That is a phrase you can look up.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
But I'm explaining to you what that is.
Yeah.
And, when people say, oh, we just watched a show and then they're basically like, California is its own world. Well, California vibrates at a higher vibrational field. So if you are closed-minded and you live in, I don't know,
Kentucky.
well, sure. If you live in Kentucky, right? Your potentiality of experience is limited to some extent. This is all when you are not sovereign to your own facilities.
Yeah.
But if you're
open, it doesn't matter where your body happens to be.
Yes.
But you can go somewhere and have an experience, right? You can go to
I'm out
just
of
making
frame.
sure. An average, we're relatively, open people, but yeah, we go to Mount Shasta and we're like, oh, this is like extra open.
Now we know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but to begin with, when you went to Mount Shasta, you would go, something's up here and it feels good, but I don't know what.
Yeah, the first time we went to Sedona, I wasn't open in the least, but I'm like, there is something here that is drawing me back. It feels really good.
No, so that's what I want to say. I did not know this. That people already knew this about Steve Jobs.
Oh, yeah.
But basically,
Reality
that is
distortion.
what Steve Jobs is able to do or was able to do. But, he's able to hold the vibrational field of possibility into an advanced potential that is not here in this physical form yet, because he's accessing higher conscious of potentiality. He comes into a space that is not going to, he comes into a space and he does not let the space override it. The reason why it's so successful in California is because California as a whole vibrates at a higher elevational frequency of electromagnetism, right? And so therefore, if you're vibrating higher and you're in a space that does not send you into the dumps, and you're able to hold your sovereignty and basically not have that sovereignty be suppressed by the masses, which is usually what happens when, reality kicks in, then you are an inventor and you are a breakthrough science and you are whatever.
Right. It's like, think about all the amazing, if you just want to limit it to technological stuff that has come out of California. Why? It's not due to the taxes, because from what I hear, the taxes are awful in California. It's not that. It's that there's something about it that ends up breeding this open-mindedness, this acceptance of what else is possible, and breaking out of the limited box of, well, this is what we know reality is, and we can't go outside of that.
Yeah.
And there's there's Berkeley and there's UCLA and these
Harbath Institute is there.
Sure, but the Stanford, very, very
all the tech startups,
all the tech startups, these top-notch educational systems that are your Berkeley graduate is a bit more open-minded in my mind than your Harvard graduate.
Yeah.
Your Harvard graduate feels a little bit more rigid. And, I know this box very well. I'm going to work inside this box and I'm going to master this box. But your Berkeley graduate is like, oh, I understand the box, but yet the box, there's holes in this box and I can go outside the box.
Yes. But
and that is largely an East Coast, West Coast divide in the United States. It feels.
Sure. Sure. California and then, Oregon and Washington are all very techy. I'm not sure about Oregon, but, Washington obviously has Microsoft and
Amazon
and UPS, I think. All of those started there.
UPS or FedEx, one of them, yeah.
UPS, I think.
Okay.
Right. So there's these huge startups that unproportionately are huge. And you're like, wait, what's up with the West Coast? Well, especially California, there's this basically higher frequency of openness that is already there. Let's be honest, most people who go there are being drawn to that frequency. So they're more likely to stay in that frequency when they get there. And then the tech people who have even larger dreams are able to, one, feed off the consciousness that is already on a higher frequency, because the land also supports that consciousness. So through that symbiosis, these three factors of, a dreamer, morphic field of the population within the region, and then the land support itself is kind of this trifecta that drives that innovation and then thus succeeding past any current status quo.
Yeah.
Now, are we talking about an amazing breakthrough with like the first iPhone or the iPad? No, the world did not get reinvented, but it was revolutionary and then thus propelled us forward probably 10 to 15 years quicker than it would have otherwise.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? So we're on the trajectory, but it's just when you have those leaps is when your vibratory field is accessing your consciousness beyond the box.
Yep.
Right? So going back to the conclusion that I wanted to make, which I think we'll go into in the next podcast, is to have Earth survive, to have humanity go forward, all of these larger conversations of, extinction events or, modeling of propagation of inevitable falls are only there because they're being calculated from the space of this closed conscious box, right? So just like the scientist who was able to generate this tremendous breakthrough, but then the second his secretary vibrationally field wasn't there, all of a sudden that wasn't the case. Same way, we cannot have a conversation about what will happen to us on Earth, because the only answer that we will have to that question is nothing if we continue to function at the vibratory field that we are right now. Because we're making the calculation based on the consciousness level of reach of the greater mean, which is not so great. But if we start to raise the mean, I don't know if that statistically applies, right? And we start to pipe into the greater knowledge of consciousness, and enough of us do it, then the greater mean gets pulled up, and then all of a sudden we are starting to experience things that were, oh my gosh, crazy or anomalous,
right? But
that will become our truth. And so then the future of humanity actually propagates there and not anywhere else.
Right. Think about all the things that exist today that would have just been crazy 50, 100, 1,000 years ago. Like just anything that we take for granted today would have just been, it would have literally been magic.
Yeah.
50 years ago, 100 years ago.
Yeah.
An iPhone 50 years ago, just insane.
Yeah. When Nostradamus, right, like in his, all of his prophecies talked about birds in the sky. And then he talked about, I don't know how he described power lines, but he saw these power lines. Now power lines are obsolete and we're like, oh, those are morons who build the power lines, right? But lines in the sky that carry some. Do you know what I mean? Like for him to describe what a power line was not even in the set of words that he could use, because the idea of it being electricity, right, which did not exist back then, and two, it being carried somehow, and then it is then made into things that glow and then produce power to tools that were power. We are so far away in our descriptive language selection that we can't even comprehend the future, and thus we describe it in these brush strokes, understandings based on the reality that we're facing right now.
It reminds me of, was it Enoch in the Bible who was like the traditional interpretation is that he was taken up by God, but if you read it, and this is Eric von Donigen's goes a long way to describe this, he was abducted by aliens. Like he describes, some sort of chariot coming down from the sky,
right? Because
spaceship isn't a word back in ancient
the only thing you have is a
Hebrew
chariot
or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And, it describes these wheels that can move in every direction, which, okay, that makes sense now, but it didn't make sense back then. And, he gets in it and it makes this thunderous roar or something. Okay, well, that's like a jet engine or a rocket or something. Whatever. These descriptions, the descriptions of the day are limited to the language and vocabulary of the day. Yeah. Like if we were to describe, some sort of, technology 100,000 years into the future, warp drive. But what does warp drive mean? I don't know.
But that's also the fact that we now have that part of our vocabulary and are able to even like draw back on some movies that had that disclosure. Where like, okay, yeah, in the movie I kind of saw that they like
they've been space and time, but we don't even know what that means. We're just like we've wrapped up this concept that we can't even comprehend of bending space and time and warping between places in the galaxy as warp drive. We couldn't possibly describe it in any possible sense. We just pretend warp drive describes everything. And
what's
it made out of? Some sort of fancy metal? I don't know. There'd be some sort of metal that we don't know, don't have, can't make today. All this stuff that we can't make, we can't even imagine. But if we were to describe it with today's technology, it's a flying saucer. That's about as good as we can do.
Yeah. A conversation we heard lately that like Stanford analyzed metal from the flying saucers that are being stored somewhere. And then it was basically nanotechnology metal that was self-regenerating.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And now we're like, okay, well, we know what nano
we can
technology
start
is,
to wrap our heads around it.
And then we know what metal is. So somehow if we combine nano technology with metal and then thus have it programmed to be replicatable into self-fixing, then you can kind of see how a metal could mend itself through what seems to be live type of a behavior.
Yeah.
But many people in disclosure talk about spaceships that are sentient, that are metallic kind of ish, that grow and then replicate and then mend and all that. Do you know what I mean? So for us to understand what that could potentially even mean is like, oh, okay, well, I guess the only thing we can do is we can understand consciousness and we can understand programming, and then we can understand metal and we can send nanotechnology. So what if we combine programming with metal and with nanotechnology and then teach it to mend itself based on behavioral replication? Right. Like that's the best we can do.
Well, it's like in one of the key premises of Terminator 2 is that they had the hand and the microchip from the original Terminator in Terminator 1 in the
glass case of the
scientist? What's the company? I'm losing all of my nerd points. Cyberdyne Technologies. Cool, super cool name, especially in the 80s. And they're like, we don't know how it works. And we studied it, and it's just 100 years past anything that we could possibly make today. But they knew that it was possible. And just knowing that it's possible, this is the hand, right? They, tried to backwards engineer, and they're like, well, we can start making it. Of course, in the movie, that sent them down the path of recreating the technology that destroyed them. And, but once you can't describe it other than it's a fancy version of what we have now. You can't make it because it's using alloys and technologies that we don't have and can't even comprehend. But knowing that it exists is enough to break out of the box that you're locked in and let you start down the path of how do we get there.
Yeah. No, knowing that it exists, I guess in this case, allows you to open yourself up to the positioning in time and space where you already have that. And then you're able to basically just download everything that you need in order to have that here and now. Right.
There's so many movies where that's the time travel-ish movies where, there's something to get somewhere in the future. They have to almost they have to know that it's possible, and that enables them to get there.
But I mean, think about this. We do this right now, right? Like this is the most rudimentary example that I can come up with. Like I look at a recipe, or I look at someone on Instagram make a recipe in their little 30-second short, right? And I like, oh look, here's the list of ingredients, or here I see them use the ingredients, and here's the process in which I'm able to make this dish. Therefore, this is the most rudimentary thing. Therefore, for me to make this dish is like that. Do you see what I mean? And then I put myself into the process of conscious extrapolation into the future where I have the ingredients, whether through Amazon or through Krogering. And then I am performing the tasks necessary to create that recipe. So then, therefore, I'm enjoying that recipe. Do you see what I mean? That is in the case where I'm not creating a recipe and I'm actually copying it from an existing sequence of visual perception, right? The morphic field has already had the recipe, right? But in that case, I'm tuning into the morphic field of Instagram, and then thus, whoever posted on Instagram. But how is it any different for me to have an electric capability, like in this case, electric capability of me being able to fire the right electrical signals to be able to push my iPhone to the Instagram app button in order to have that app be pulled up and then be able to see a video? Do you see what I mean? That is an electrical output of me interacting with an app.
Yeah.
What if I just have a higher electrical input to where instead of me tapping into an app on the Instagram, I tap into the consciousness where we have propulsion technology? It is not any different. We are just not seeing things from that perspective.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs saw things from that perspective. Tesla saw this from this perspective. In fact, the moron scientists who experienced the levitation stuff did not see things from that perspective, but his assistant did.
Yeah.
So one, you don't even have to be smart. You can be an idiot surrounded by people who just have larger electrical circuits, and you just basically have to think outside the box yourself, and then basically be fed by people who have larger electrical fields. I mean, I'm not trying to downplay current tech invaders, but there are that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And interesting, they're invaders and not inventors. But yeah, right, and that's what it is. We are going into a conscious potential. We open to potentiality of the consciousness where we exist in the different form, in the much better form, in a fuller expression of our being, because we are tapping into a greater electrical potential of our own selves through this process of enlightenment.
Yeah.
And the interesting is it's, to some extent, it being branded as enlightenment almost does a disservice, because like those people who are like, oh, those are the woke idiot people who blah, 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 blah. But those are the Wakudi people that have the higher vibrational electrical magnetism who are able to access higher fields of potentiality that has humanity survive. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So we're approaching it from a very broken standpoint, but I would hope that this basically marries all of these fields to where that is what the future should be and will be for those who choose to be in that future.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, the remaining people who choose to experience a different future, yes, they do not have the potentiality of existence because through the probability of pre-calculated Earth outcome, they do not exist. But that is because they're piping into that probability.
Right. It's a choose your own adventure life.
Yes. But so for those who are discussing higher consciousness and how do we survive, you survive by upgrading your consciousness. Like Windows 95 is not there anymore and it's not supported forward. That's basically what the difference is.
It's probably how our government, probably the nuclear missiles are run on Windows 95.
Okay, fine.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Okay, fine. DOS, right?
Yeah.
Is DOS supported still? I don't know.
I mean, it's not supported, but it's like, it probably still lives on it.
But actually, that is absolutely perfect. The consciousness of Windows 95 is no longer supported, but yet it exists. And those who choose to be on Windows 95 will continue to have that as their truth. But guess what? There's no support for it. Therefore, you're stagnantly at the level of Windows 95.
Right.
And then those who choose to upgrade to, I don't know, we're not on Microsoft, so whatever the fuck the latest situation is.
Windows 11.
Is it 11?
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was like, we were just like at 10, like 5 years ago. We did not graduate from 10 to even higher than 11?
It's 11.
Okay, so maybe Windows machines are not going into the future based on the growth of numbers. But think about it, that is basically what explaining consciousness on Earth right now. There are still those functions and people and groups who are living by and are going to go out on Windows 95. And if that is the choice of their operating system, and then therefore continuation to live on this planet as, sooner or later, because it is not a supported software, you can kind of tell what the outcome is. As more software comes out that no longer coalesces and no longer computes with Windows 95, you have less and less options to work with things in the future.
You're stuck in an old modality. And
and the future is
moving
not
on.
interfacing with you. You're not interfacing into the future.
The future keeps moving on, and it's going to move on without you.
Which is fine. But
so everybody gets to make that choice if that's for them or not.
Yeah. So that split that is happening right now, right? The split on Earth that is happening is basically that. Do you choose to upgrade your consciousness, which is not hard. It's just a matter of like realizing that you're currently choosing self-psychosis as opposed to seeing everybody else for what they are, who are the people who are upgrading that consciousness. Or do you choose to operate in Windows 95?
I mean, there's biologically, for progress to be made for human society, what is often necessary is for the older generation to die off, retire or die off, and then the next younger generation can come in and make some changes. And that seems to be necessary because the older generation is often in power. Look at like the Senate or the House, there's a whole bunch of old fogies there who've been doing it the same way for the last 20, 30, 40 years or whatever. And it isn't going to change until they retire or die off. And then there's a new generation ushered in who might have different views or different ways of doing things. Yeah,
but currently, that's a whole other podcast, but currently what Earth is facing right now is the struggle between Windows 95 consciousness and then, basically the cloud.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's like the same thing. The old generation is stuck on Windows 95 and they're too old to change and too old to look at a different way, and they're set in their ways or whatever. For the most part, there are exceptions. And then there's the new generation who's, oh, look at this, we've got the cloud, we've got the iPhones, we've got the whatever. I don't know why it's going to technology, but we're looking at things in a different way. And eventually, it's inevitable that they will retire or die off and they will come in. And then, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, that will be outdated. And there will be another thing that will come in. And it will just keep ideally improving. I mean, maybe it'll go backwards every couple of years because, some weird idea comes in and, well, that wasn't a good idea. But I believe it will self-correct into openness and positivity and love over time through more and more open generations of people. Now, any person, no matter whether you're 9 or you're 99, can open themselves up. But it seems that in general, the older someone is, the more resistance there is to that. Through 99 years of living a certain way, makes it harder to start viewing things differently than if you're 9 years old and you're like, okay, well, yeah, sure, I've got imaginary friends.
Well, no, because, if you spend 99 years basically trying to prove yourself that what you're doing is right.
There's a lot of...
and everybody else is psychotic.
You're really invested in that.
Yeah, you will... The amount of inertia necessary for you to basically classify yourself as psychotic because you've been trying to protect yourself and actually realize, wait, the portion of me that existed before this psychosis of safety was actually the right portion. It is really hard to revert to yourself before you were 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're going to really upset your constituency who voted for you based on your old values versus new views.
You're talking about from the political system?
Yeah, sure. In that case too.
Oh no, I'm just talking about.
But yes, in general for people, this isn't limited to politics.
Yeah, yeah. So I know it started the consciousness, but that is what consciousness is. It's ever expanding, and it is ever present, and it's bigger than we can ever imagine. Because not only is it us, and then us beyond this physical form, it is also our planetary consciousness. It is also our universal consciousness. It is also our galactic consciousness. It is also really unlimited consciousness. Because not only is it actually expanding galactically in more ways that we can comprehend, it is expanding vibrationally into more realms of possibility of existence that we can comprehend. So it was... To me, what is more beautiful about it, which should get all the scientists exciting, is there's never a limit to what you are going to experience.
Right.
If you just stay on the path of open-mindedness.
Right. And the refusal to accept things that don't meet with your current limited worldview is just not a sustainable thing to do.
Well, the refusal is solely there to keep safety in place.
I mean, yes.
But what's
what's
shocking is how many times that barrier gets hit and how many refusals you continue to face. Like how many refusals, how hard does the universe have to slap you over and over and over before you're like, maybe I should at least look into this concept of, I don't know, propulsion, or I don't know, warp drives, or I don't know, manifestation on the spot of physical goods.
Yeah.
It's too much.
Too much.
Overload. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.